Hello, I'm Baroness Camilla de la Renard of the Middle Kingdom, and I'm going to be teaching a netting class. Now, I've got a dowel rod hanging from a frame that I've made out of PVC pipe because it was cheap and the frame will knock down and it's easily carried around. So I've got a dowel rod, I've got a gauge stick, I've got a netting shuttle, and I'm using a large gauge and a large shuttle and large thread because I'm exaggerating for teaching purposes. To cast on, I'm going to start with 2 half hitches and then a knot. And to start with the very first knot, you come behind the gauge, around the dowel, and hold it in place. For the second half, I grab that and I come in behind the dowel, but this time instead of going around the gauge, I go in front of the gauge. I go around the dowel in front of the gauge. There's the knot. That's what it looks like before it's tightened up and seated, and I pull that tight. Now I want to make sure that doesn't come undone, so I make a slightly different knot. I give myself a little more thread to do that. I come behind the gauge, under the dowel, over the gauge. So I have a loop hanging down here that I'm securing with my ring finger. I come through the loop, pick it up off the gauge, and I don't let go of it till it's almost seated. And there it is. So I now have 2 half hitches and a knot. And I don't have a loop yet, but I will with the next one. So I come around the gauge, behind the gauge, under the dowel, over the gauge, and there's my first loop. Now I do another half hitch, this time in front of the gauge, so it looks like that. Pull it tight, and it's almost done, but I want it secure. So I come between the 2 loops, under the dowel, over the gauge. I've got the loop secured on my ring finger. I put the shuttle through the loop, front to back, pick it up off the gauge, hold it securely with the ring finger, and then slide it into place. So this is what it looks like. First half, second half, get it off the gauge, there it is, secure it. Come again between the stitches, between the dowel and the gauge. I've got the loop around my ring finger. The shuttle goes through the loop comes off the gauge. There's the knot, there's the knot. I turn loose, and now it's seated. If you have any questions about what knots I'm using, consult your local Boy Scout. First half hitch, second half hitch in front of the gauge. There they are. That's what they look like. Tighten it up. Separate it out a little bit. Now it's time to secure it. Back to front between the dowel and the gauge. I'm holding the loop with my ring finger. Pop the loop off the gauge. It's still around my ring finger. It's almost in position. And there it goes. You keep doing this until you have the number of loops around the gauge that you want. It's not necessarily the number of stitches up here. They're offset. And you have to remember that. So I've got 1, 2, 3. When I complete this one, I'll have 4 meshes. And that's what you want, is a mesh. Now I'm going to do one more again very slowly. Then I'm going to finish casting on, and I'm going to show you how to cast on the other side, and that's what makes it a tube. Once again, very slowly. First half hitch, behind the gauge, over the dowel. Come in behind the dowel, back to front, between the dowel and the gauge. There it is. Second half hitch, in front of the gauge, back to front, around the dowel, over the gauge. That's what it looks like. I have 2 half hitches. When in doubt, consult your local Boy Scout. Snug that into position. Now, I need a knot to secure it. The thread goes around the gauge, between the dowel and the gauge, back to front. The ring finger is holding the thread secure so it doesn't go flailing around. Pick the loop off the gauge. Start sliding it into position. And there it is. Now I'm going to continue casting on until I have the number of meshes that I want. Then I'll flip it over and do the other side. So we stop now.